I am Ed Clark. I'm the president and co-founder of the Wildlife Center of Virginia, and just delighted to be here. Before we go any further, let me point out a couple of the other folks who are here. We've got the Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources standing right over here. He's the one with the tie. And then the new Director of Planning and Budget. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I've learned a long time ago. I'm going to add an extra syllable or call Darren Darrell or something, and I'm not doing that. The new Director of Planning and Budget for the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, who is really the #2 guy at the agency to keep things moving in the right direction. Our colleague Steve Living, most of you know Steve, and we've worked together on many issues, and he's the eagle guy for this part of the state and many other fine things. So three of our colleagues here, we really do appreciate you all being here. Now, how many of you have been to an eagle release before? How many of you, this is first time? Ooh-ha, man, we got a pack of rookies here. This is cool. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do, then we'll do it, and then I'll tell you what we've done. Before we get started, I'm going to explain about the bird and tell you a little bit about the Wildlife Center. We'll get the bird out of the cage. It's been in this cage for, well, since last night. Please ignore the rat that's in the cage and, last night's dinner and all that stuff. We won't get pictures of that. But before we just pull it out and turn it loose or open the door and expect it to fly away, it's been in a covered cage since last night. And so we'll get him out. I will hold him, and we'll get people to form up sort of a semicircle. We're going to launch him in that direction. So we'll form a semicircle here between here and Steve's truck over there, and I will hold him and move him along so you can get pictures. So don't worry, no elbowing and eye gouging, and don't step on any of the kids. Well, I mean, some of them if they're underfoot. But we'll get out so that you can get a good look at the bird. And once everybody's gotten all the photographs, we're going to get a couple of pictures with a couple of our VIPs here. But once we are ready to release the bird, and this is not just for show. It may look like it, and people say, oh, just take the bird out instead of showing him off. Well, what we're really doing is letting the bird acclimate to the bright sunshine. And so his pupils will come down, letting him acclimate to the temperature, and get really set in his mind that he wants to get away from us, which is a high priority. We don't want to just open it up and he's out and, oh, where am I? He'll be looking around the whole time. And with any kind of luck, and we should have somebody hold the pool on this, they often will head to that clump of trees over there. Having said that, we'll see. We've also had everybody point, and now the wind is blowing a little like this, and they'll take a hook and go right back over the trees and out of sight and out of mind in 10 seconds. But we'll do our best. Now, for those of you that, especially the rookies among you, the Wildlife Center is a nonprofit organization. We are a teaching and research hospital for wildlife medicine. So we are not only caring for about 3,000 animals a year, we are teaching veterinary students and professionals from all over North America and indeed from around the world. So we get fourth-year vet students from every vet school in the United States and Canada, and there are about 28 in the U.S. and I think 4 in Canada. But we also have students and professionals from about 40 other countries that actually come to our facility in Waynesboro to learn various aspects of wildlife management, wildlife medicine, wildlife conservation. While we do fix broken animals, and that's a big activity, our main purpose for being in existence as an organization is teaching the world to care about and care for wildlife and the environment. So we are a teaching facility that uses the care of wildlife as a way to tell stories about what's happening to wild animals, but also as a way to identify environmental problems. So every animal that comes through the door is a sample of what's going on in the environment. And over the years, we have found a lot of problems. I was telling Rosemary, who's one of our new diagnostic interns at the Wildlife Center, just started 2 weeks ago, about the story in 1985 when we got the very first bald eagle in at the Wildlife Center, Virginia, a bird that had been poisoned Department Director Bob Duncan at the time was Assistant Director of Wildlife Division, and of course this always happens after closing hours on Friday. You know, it's like when your pet gets hurt and you have to go to the emergency clinic. But that afternoon we got the bird, we realized it had been poisoned. Bob and his team went back to the farm on which it had been found and got a list of all the chemicals that were used, and it was here on Northern Neck. And it was a long list of chemicals. We called the Veterinary Poison Control Center and we got down the list to a chemical called Furadan. Active ingredient is carbofuran, and they said, bingo, that's it, nasty stuff. Make a long story short, we started looking for, we treated the bird, it recovered, was released, that's all fine, but what we found is that particular chemical was killing a lot of birds. We found 6 eagles, I believe it was, dead or alive, working with the Fish and Wildlife Service in the next 24 months, next 2 years. We notified the authorities, thinking that's all that needs to happen. We'll notify the authorities and they'll fix it. We're over being that naive. But it took a long time, but Virginia was the first place in the entire country where this product was banned. And Bob Duncan and I, working hand in hand, along with a number of other people, but we were the ones that took the beating on it. And Bob Duncan, the director of the agency, did a fabulous job and did something that was pretty risky. He picked up the phone and called the governor personally because we had found out that the State Pesticide Control Board was going to let this company off the hook. And Bob and I both knew the governor personally. He picked up the phone and said, you've got to send the Commissioner of Agriculture to meet with the group. And he did. The Pesticide Control Board did not like it at all. Bottom line was the chemical was banned in Virginia. This was on a Friday morning. The next week on Tuesday, the company withdrew the chemical from all markets nationwide. According to EPA's figures, that chemical was killing 2 million birds a year when used according to the label. One eagle coming in, cooperation between our organization and the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. It was the Game Commission back then. That set a foundation for something that continues today. That partnership is alive and well. Many of you know that earlier this year we opened what is now, we believe, the largest facility for rearing and rehabilitation of black bears anywhere in North America. The Game Department is our full partner on that, having picked up $200,000 of the construction cost. Almost, well, it turned out it was well over a third, between a third and a half. And our partnership with them is ongoing and very, very active, very collaborative. And as a result, in the last year, we've provided care for over 40 bears in just the last 12 months. And we're real excited about that. Back to this bird. This bird is an example of a species, the bald eagle, that is important to a lot of us. A lot of us see eagles on t-shirts around the room, and the eagle followers on the websites and the eagle cams and all of these things. This is a bird that inspires a lot of very positive emotional reaction. In 1985, when we got that first bald eagle at the Wildlife Center, there were approximately 60 nesting pairs in Virginia. 60. Today, there are somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 nesting pairs in Virginia. And that is because public agencies, private organizations advocating for the environmental practices that not only protect wildlife, but protect people as well. We've worked hand in hand. We honestly believe that the partnership we've got with our state agency, which we consider to be one of the best in the whole country, is the example that ought to be followed. And we're very, very proud of that, and we do everything we can to nurture that. So this particular bird was found here on Northern Neck, where one of the largest concentrations of bald eagles is here in Virginia. It had been found sitting beside the road. The assumption was that it had probably been hit by a car. We had a fairly compelling piece of evidence that it had been at least eating, because when we x-rayed the bird looking for broken bones, the x-ray was completely weird. There were all these extra bones in this eagle. And we're going, you know, what is that? It's not broken ribs, it's not this, and it's not that. And so some of the vet students are freaking out that this eagle is deformed. It's got extra bones. Well, it turned out it had eaten a rabbit, and inside this burn was a leg bone that was that long. And it had just swallowed it whole all the way down, which probably kept him from being quite as agile as he might otherwise have been. But so their digestive system handled that. He went ahead and processed it out. And so this particular bird really just required some cage rest. He was banged up a little bit, but was not seriously injured. It did not need any type of major reconstructive surgery or anything of that sort. So we're lucky. A lot of them do come in that really require big problems to be fixed. So we're looking at not only a changing population, but changing issues affecting eagles. We found ourselves in a situation we really never thought we would reach in our lifetimes, and that is we have almost all the eagles the state can hold, and at least in our prime habitat. And Steve, chime in here, but our understanding from the people who are managing it, not all the eagles that they can hold, but we have primary habitat along the tidal rivers. This is perfect eagle habitat, which is one of the reasons that the Land's End Wildlife Management Area is owned by and managed by our Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. Eagles are certainly big users. And what you got, is it 2 nests on this property, or?
There's 2 active nests and a third that I think is rotated.
Okay, so we're putting this bird right back in eagle habitat. Now we had to be sure that there was not like an eagle's nest in that tree, in which case we released the bird and the eagles would come down and beat the fire out of it. In the early days, gunshot wound was not uncommon, and poisoning was the most typical thing we would see. Now, the 2 things we see are lead poisoning, and that comes from these birds scavenging animals that have been hunted and ingesting fragments of lead bullets. Now, that problem probably existed 25 years ago, 30 years ago when we were working on this. We just couldn't test for it. We just didn't have the technology that would let us do a test on a bird in any type of rapid way. It was very expensive to do. And so now we have a little device that sits right on the counter in our lab, and in about 90 seconds we can test and see what the blood lead levels are for these birds. And the last set of numbers I remember, in 2013, 60% of the bald eagles coming into the Wildlife Center of Virginia, their primary or secondary reason for being there was lead poisoning. And that's a shocking thing. As somebody who grew up in a hunting, fishing, shooting culture, my first reaction is, oh, it's the people that are trying to get hunting banned. That's not it at all. What we're finding is that something we used to think of as benign, we now know has potential consequences. So we're dealing with that through education. We're working with our state hunter education folks to be sure that it's included in the hunter safety programs, that safety with your bullet continues even after that bullet stops moving. If you shoot an animal and it's in the field, don't you leave that animal out there where it can be scavenged by wildlife. If you're killing a deer and you leave the entrails in the field, bury them, cover them with sticks. It's such an easy thing to do to keep that bullet from killing unintended victims. Now, with the Wildlife Center, with this animal, there will not be any type of tracking of this animal other than, is he banded? I suspect all of the eagles, I'm certain we're banding these days with a federal identification band. We've got about 4 or 5 other eagles in the pipeline, literally, that push this bird out. The reason we scheduled today on sort of short notice is we need the cage space. A little later this summer, we'll be releasing 3 young of the year bald eagle chicks that are bigger than this bird now. And at least 2 of those, and we're hoping all 3, will carry a transmitting device that will let us follow them, track their movements, and keep up with them after they go to the wild. We've got one that we released, gosh, almost 3 years ago now, the NX bird, that the transmitters are only supposed to last 2 years before the battery goes dead. This bird didn't read the book. This battery's still pumping out signals every 48 hours, and there are literally people all over the world that come to our website and track the movements of this bird. For a long time, we were never sure whether the animals that were raised in captivity and released really did well, really acted in a normal way, and now we can say with absolute certainty that is a possible outcome. And what we never knew before. And a lot of the cynics said, they fly off and they die out of sight. They don't know how to be eagles raised in captivity. Well, yeah, they do.